Welcome to the Knowledge of Self series presented by J.A.A Speaks. The Knowledge of Self series is where we delve into various topics pertaining to gaining the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of self. Before we jump in, make sure that you follow J.A.A Speaks on Facebook and Instagram, and make sure that you visit our website, j-a-a-speaks.com, for the valuable resources that you need to help you along your journey towards gaining the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of self. I am J.A.A.
All right, so we're going to pick back up where we left off. So essentially right now we're looking at part 3 of this discourse on the origin of the United States. Discussion that, we've been going over. So I want to direct y'all attention here though. Let me verify. Can y'all see my screen? Because I don't see my screen glowing green. All right, good deal. So we were talking about the founders of the 13 colonies, and I revealed again how the British, all right, were swarthy black, were Moors, all right. Again, I want to direct our attention back here to Benjamin Franklin, his essay, America as a Land of Opportunity, written in 1751. He wrote that France, Italy, Russia, Germany, Sweden, Spain, Asia, Africa, and America is swarthy black. Swarthy is an adjective that means dark colored, especially of skin. So we already identified several nations in Europe as being Moorish, all right, as well as in Asia, Africa, and America, swarthy, dark colored people, all right, being the original people of the land. All right. So understanding that when they talk about the British, again, they're talking about the Welsh. All right. They're talking about the Irish. Okay. They're talking about the Scottish. Okay. So they're talking about Scotland. They're talking about Ireland. They're talking about Wales. And they're talking about Britain. All right. That's the United Kingdom, the UK. All right, going into them controlling France and areas like that as well. All areas Benjamin Franklin said were Moorish. Okay, and again, just for the people that will watch this, understanding that we're connecting these dark-skinned people, all right, that are considered swarthy to the word blackamoor, all right, dark-skinned person, black-skinned African. All right. And showing you that the blackamoor is a compound word using the adjective black, which is a description, and then more, which is the proper noun, which is the identity of a dark-skinned person, is a Moor. Okay. So that's why I'm calling all of these dark-skinned people, no matter if they are from France, Italy, Russia, Germany, Sweden, Spain, Asia, Africa, and America. I'm identifying them as Moors. Okay. So I want to make that clear. So when we look at the 5 Moorish founding fathers of the 13 colonies, we see again that King James, who was a steward, King James Stewart, King Charles I, his son, King Charles II, his grandson, and King James, the second, his grandson. He is the brother to King Charles II. All right, are all Moors. All right, are all Moors. And then lastly, here we got King George II. All right, who again is coming out of this same line. Okay, a succession. All right. And he was the Prince of Wales. He's from Britain. All right. King James II was the King of England, Duke of York. All right. We also have here King Charles Okay, King Charles being the king of England, Scotland, and Ireland. All right, we got King Charles the First, okay, being of Scottish descent. So he's a Moorish Scot. His nationality was Scottish. All right, but he was of Moorish descent. All right. He was the king of Scotland, Ireland, and England. So again, all of these people again coming out of Europe were Moors. All right, King James, king of England, France, and Ireland. All right, controlling all of this up in here. All right. But Benjamin Franklin told us this whole area in here was inhabited by dark-skinned people. Okay. So we got to understand that the European of today, which we would call the white man, all right, is not actually the original inhabitants of Europe and not the original inhabitants of these nations that they have nationalities in today. Okay, they were the lower class, they were the subjects, they were the property, they were the slaves of these people who were Moorish. They were British Moors. Okay, they were British Moors. I wanted to stress that point so we can understand who was on the throne, who was ruling, who had power. He told you in 1751, Benjamin Franklin did, that all of these places were Moorish, which means that it was Moors in control in 1751. All right, not them. All right, we talked about the Articles of Confederation and showed how all of these colonies that were founded by these men, Virginia, Massachusetts, and Maine, New England, New Hampshire, Maryland, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Delaware, North Carolina, South Carolina, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Georgia were all the 13 colonies, which we see in the Articles of Association. All right, pleading for assistance. All right, again, they went to the American Moors. They went to Moorish Americans. All right, the Continental Congress in America, these colonists who came over from Britain doing business on behalf of these men. All right, and these royal families who were Moorish. Okay, those so-called white people of today, which I showed you was white, W-I-G-H-T, meaning a creature, a demon, a spirit of the earth, a gnome, were sent over here as beggars, as squatters, as criminals, okay, to be the employees, to be the property, to be the slaves that were doing business here on behalf of these royal families. Okay. And they, through the Articles of Association, were working with the American Moors to free themselves from the oppressive system that these royal families had them in. Okay. They were the property. All right. And they were being oppressed. They were raising the revenue. They were raising the taxes on them. They were taking large percentages of their money. Okay, because they were their property, and it was getting so bad that they couldn't even take care of themselves. So they went to the American Moors, since they were in America doing business with them, went to their government, the Continental Congress, to ask for help. And they told them to basically do an economic boycott against their British Moorish masters, the British Moors. They told them to do economic boycott against them. Don't import their goods no more. Don't export none of the goods y'all growing in America and creating in America to them. All right. Don't pay them anything. Block all of that. Okay. And I'm sure your conditions will change, is what the American Moors were saying to them. Okay. So I want to further reinforce the position of the so-called white man of today. When you hear me just say white man, I try to do my best to say so-called when I'm referencing them in modern time. When I reference them and I don't say that, I want y'all to understand that I'm saying W-I-G-H-T. All right, a creature. All right. A living being that is a creature that is a spirit of the earth, that is a gnome, that's a demon. Okay. And I'm talking about their energy, their nature, all right, their makeup. Okay. So this is a PDF. I'll make sure that y'all get this. PDF. They were white and they were slaves. I'll make sure that I put this on J.A.A.speaks.com as well for people that watch this video to see. They were white and they were slaves. The untold history of the enslavement of whites in early America. See the whites, WIGHT. This was their condition. They tell us this very briefly in American history, that the colonists, the pilgrims, they came over here and they were debtors. They were prisoners. They were in poverty in Europe, and they came here seeking a better life and freedom of religion. That's what they would tell us, right? This is the condition that they were in. And Benjamin Franklin told you that everybody that was ruling on every doggone continent was Moorish. Okay. So they are most definitely the pilgrims, the colonists, same thing. Okay. That is them right here. Okay. You see, he's chained up. Okay. This is by Michael A. Hoffman II, who is a white man. Okay. So let's look at this introduction real quick. All right. I just want to use this to substantiate the condition that they were in during the time that they try to lead us to believe that they were enslaving millions upon millions of Moorish people that they call Africans, that they call Negroes, that they call blacks, all of that stuff. Okay. They were of two sorts. First, such as were brought over by masters of ships to be sold as servants. Okay. When you hear masters, I want you to understand that that is Moors. Okay. Moorish people. All right. Were brought over by masters of ships to be sold as servants, such as we call them, my dear, says she, but they are more properly called slaves. It's come from Daniel Defoe, Maul Flanders. Okay. This is a history of white people that has never been told in any coherent form, largely because most modern historians have, for reasons of politics or psychology, the mind, refused to recognize white slaves in early America as just that, slaves. They have failed to, okay, largely for political and psychological reasons. Today, not a tear is shed for the sufferings of millions of our own enslaved forefathers. 200 years of white slavery in America have been almost completely obliterated from the collective memory of the American people. 200 years of white slavery. 200 years, but they was enslaving us. But 200 years, they say. Who wants to be reminded that half, perhaps as many as thirds of the original American colonists came here not of their own free will, but kidnapped, shanghaied, impressed, duped, beguiled, and yes, in chains. We tend to gloss over it. We prefer to forget the whole sorry chapter. They talking about their origin. They're talking about their beginning here, not ours. Our beginning was not this. Their beginning was slavery, and they gloss over it. They're telling us right here that those British Moors duped them, took them, brought them over here against their free will, kidnapped them, okay, and brought them over here in chains. You see, and this came from Elaine Kendall, Los Angeles Times, September 1st, 1985. A correct understanding of the authentic history of the enslavement of whites in America could have profound consequences for the future of the races. All right, they're already saying that it's going to have consequences. A correct understanding of the authentic history of the enslavement of whites in America can have a profound consequences for the future of the races, because people don't know this. So if this information was to get out, people would know that they've been duped, that everything, that politics is based on race relations and money. And they use these areas and topics to be able to win elections. But at the same time, the misinformation that they give people through the education system is creating psychological conditioning inside of the people, which is pushing them toward a foreseeable or predictable outcome and future in the decisions that they will make. Okay. So that ties into what they said earlier about they've hid this information for political and psychological reasons. But if this is made known, the sheet will be pulled back like the Wizard of Oz, and we will see them for what they are. Okay. That's why when you start to tell people this, they start to glitch, they start to shake up, and they start to act like, no, don't tell me that, because it compromises everything that they know. This is equivalent to in the Matrix when they have the agents take over somebody's body and the people start shaking first, and then they turn into the agent. Okay? That's a symbolic of that. All right? Most of the books on white labor. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. Let me go back up. We cannot be sure that the position of the earliest Africans differed markedly from that of the white indentured servants. So they saying those that were African slaves here, condition was not too different from the people that they was calling indentured servants. Remember, they would always teach us in school that the slaves were black people, but white people were indentured servants, and they served for like 7 years and then were released and were free. But history actually tells you that these individuals were slaves. They was one and the same with the Africans that were over here, that were enslaved. Okay, because our people, it was a system of slavery that was in operation. All right, that white people were largely enslaved then, but some African Moors would be caught, swept up in that as well. Okay. Most of the books on white labor in early America are titled with words like white indentured servitude, white bond servant, white servants, etc. It is interesting that white people who were bound to a condition of what became in many cases permanent chattel slavery unto death are not referred to as slaves by establishment academics. So this European is telling us, yo, our ancestors were slaves, and they were slaves until their death. Okay, to their death is what he was saying. He said the sufferings of millions of our own enslaved forefathers. He said millions of them. Let's substantiate their position, okay? With the massive concentration of educational and media resources on the Negro experience of slavery, the unspoken assumption has been that only blacks have been enslaved to any degree or magnitude worthy of study or memorial. The historical record reveals that this is not the case. However, white people have been sold as slaves for centuries, for hundreds of years. And then they go in and talk about how they were enslaved in 319 AD. 319 is the earliest date they got listed right here so far. So we talking about the 16, 17, 1800s. He going back telling us, nah, we've been enslaved. Now my folks been being enslaved by the thousands, by the millions since at least 319, based off them just using this first, is why I'm saying that. 319. Okay? 319. So look at, they've been in this position. That's why they can tell you that it's been people that look like us that's been in control. Okay, this is what we have to understand. Okay. Let's see. The fate of hundreds of thousands of white slaves sold to the Arabs was described in one Spanish text as atrocima et ferocidemia, most atrocious and harsh. The men were worked to death as galley slaves. The women, girls, and boys were used as prostitutes. White males had their genitals mutilated in castration attempts, and they called
My
castrados.
folk house. I thought I'm
Uh,
putting my folks. Why he always trying to pull up?
all right. So the fate of the hundreds of thousands of white slaves sold to the Arabs were described as being the most atrocious and harsh act. All right. White males had their genitals mutilated in castration attempts, bloody procedures of incredible brutality, which most of the white men were forced to submit, did not survive. Judging from the high prices white eunuchs commanded throughout the Middle Eastern slave markets. All right. So a eunuch or a castrato, a castrated white man, or a eunuch, all right, was a castrated male, all right, were sold on the market at high prices. Okay. They would have their noses, ears, and ears cut off, or worse, if they tried to flee. Okay. It says another change which overcomes the eunuch of two slaves of Slavic race. The word slave comes from the word Slav. So to be a slave, you have to be of the Slavic race, which is the white man, who are twins, one castrated and the other not. The eunuch becomes more disposed towards service, wiser, more able and apt for various problems of manual labor. So it says here that came from a treatise on beast. We view them as beast creatures. The Book of Animals, the Muslim scholar or Moor J.A.A. said that if we castrate them, essentially they start acting more towards service. They become wiser, more able, and more apt for manual labor. All these qualities you find only in the castrated one. All right. Think about when they castrate a dog or a horse or something like that, and their energy calm down. They're not as wild no more, and their energy calm down, their temperament calm down. So he was talking science here. On the other hand, his brother continues to have the same native torpor, the same lack of natural talent, the same imbecility common to slaves, and incapacity for learning a foreign language. Okay? This is what he's describing, the difference between a castrated slave, a castrated Slav, and a non-castrated one. The temperament difference, the quality and output difference. Okay. So this came from Charles Verlinden's book, The Slave in Medieval Europe, Volume 1, page 213. All right. So they going into all of this. They talk about Viking slavers. All right. Remember the Vikings, they come out of Northern Europe. These are Moors. All right. And it say from the most westerly component of the early medieval slave trade in Europe was the British Isles. The British Isles right here. Okay. The Iberians in ancient times inhabited the western and southern parts of Europe. The Black Basque in Spain and France, the dark Welshmen, the Scotch, which is the Scottish, and the Black Celts to the west of the Shannon River in Ireland, as well as the same kind of men in Britain and Aquitaine in France. So he just told you right here, all right, that the early medieval slave trade in Europe was in the British Isles. In the 11th century, 1000 AD, the Vikings were active slave traders in Ireland. So they're telling you these people are Moors. These are Moors if we have an understanding of world history. Okay, we can see that these are swarthy people. All right, again, telling us that they were black. All right, again, telling us all these places they just named in that book: Spain, France, Italy. All right, all that swarthy black. All right, people from Ireland, the Black Britons, Basque, were pushed westward into Wales, Westmoreland, Devon, Scotland, Cumberland, and Cornwall. All right, so again, I'm just reinforcing that these people are melanated people. These are Moors. Okay, it says from Ireland, the Vikings took the slaves or the Slavs to be sold in Muslim Spain and Scandinavia. Muslim Spain. They took them down here. All right, it said the Black Basque of Spain. So these are black people to the Muslims in Spain. They capturing people all up in here. They capturing Europeans all up in here, and bringing them down through here, capturing them all up on this island, capturing them and sending them down here to Spain. Through France down to Spain, or getting on a boat coming around France, coming into Spain and giving them to Moors. Okay. And they even to be transported into Russia. Even to be transported into Russia. Benjamin Franklin said Russia is swarthy black. You see? So we were shipping them all over the globe. Okay? Shipping them all over the globe. Some may have been taken as far as Constantinople and the Muslim Middle East. All right, so again, they saying that they got taken all the way over here. Here go the Muslim Middle East. Constantinople is in Turkey. So they saying we capturing them all up in here, bringing them all down in here, shipping them way over here and into other Muslim strongholds or Moorish strongholds and keeping them there. All right, I already told you. They say that when they was taking them to these places, they was keeping them, and they were, let me use their words, the men worked to death as galley slaves. The women, girls, and boys were used as prostitutes. They were eunuchs. Their penises were cut off. All right, to make them more disposed towards service, wiser, more able, apt, and noble. Okay. So again, this is the position that they were in. So I just want to bring this point home to early America, which is what the whole discourse that we're building on is talking about. Okay. As late as the 14th and 15th centuries, the 13 and 1400s, continuing shipments of white slaves, some of them Christians, flowed from the booming slave markets on the northern Black Sea coast into Italy, Spain, Egypt, and the Mediterranean islands. From Barbados to Virginia, colonists showed few scruples about reducing their less fortunate countrymen to a status little different from that of chattel slaves. So it's saying even though these Moors were all up in Europe and those white people were all up in Europe, they didn't care. They was taking those white people, sending them through the Black Sea, coming down through here, coming down into the Mediterranean. Okay, the Black Sea, letting you know who was there, the Black Sea, okay, and taking them all down into Italy, all down into the Mediterranean, all down into Northern Africa, all the way to the Caribbean islands. So let's use this map. So we saying Europe is over here. They capturing them, sending them all down through here, putting them on boats. That's how they would work as galley slaves. So y'all can see. How else would they have become galley slaves? Galley slave for you. Okay. Galley slave. Okay. Muslim masters. The masters. Galley slaves. You see the complexion? All right. They're trying to whitewash all of them, but we know what the Moors dress like and what they look like. But you see, this is the galley slave. They were used as galley slaves by the Moors, and they rowed these boats all the way. They rowed them all the way, all right, to the Caribbean islands as galley slaves. All right. Again, so these individuals, these white men, all right, put on boats as slaves. All right. They even showed us and showed movies back in the day. Okay, worked as galley slaves and coming and taking boats and coming all the way to Virginia, it said, which is over here, and Barbados down in here. All right. This is how they're being introduced to the new world or the old world rather. All right, the old world. This is how in the old world they were being introduced to our empire over here in America. Okay. The prevalence of the suffering of white slaves, serfs, and indentured servants in the early modern period suggests that there was nothing inevitable about limiting plantation slavery to people of African origin. He basically saying history now teaches it that it's inevitable. Only black people were slaves. They're saying no, that's not the case, because when we study history and we study what people were saying in this time, they were saying we was being enslaved by the millions. So somebody had been telling us wrong, because when we look back in history, we find ourselves as slaves. We don't find ourselves as rulers of nations. You see? So they flipped it on us. This is the information they don't want people to know. Okay? In 1659, all right, let's go back up one. The sources of racial thought in colonial America states that the slave trade worked in both directions, with white merchandise as well as black. So they just told you that it works in both directions, from America over to Europe and Africa, from Europe and Africa over here. People are being moved. Largely white people are being moved. In 1659, the English Parliament debated the practice of selling British whites, not British blacks, British whites, into slavery in the New World. In the debate, that whites were referred to not as indentured servants, but as slaves, whose enslavement threatened the liberties of all Englishmen. Remember, Englishmen, okay, Englishmen are white people. British people are Moors. Okay, there's a distinction. So they were in Europe, they were in Britain, meeting amongst each other, having discussions like, yo, if we don't speak up about all of our people getting enslaved and millions of people being sent to Africa and to America as slaves and working for these Moors in these areas, and they taking our ships when we on boats and stuff, and taking us and enslaving us, if we don't speak up about this, we might be enslaved next. Because these Moors are enslaving all of our people. You see? This is what was really going on in colonial America. All right? Again, these men, okay, these men and their families and their family, their nations, all right? Them as the ruling class was taking these individuals that look like this, taking these people, all right, doing them like this, okay? Castrating them and all that stuff, and sending them over here to America to do business on their behalf. Okay, and the Articles of Association is the first time that these Europeans in America stepped up by way of the American Moors and their government, our Republican form of government here, and started to petition for help from a nation. We need help. We are a stateless people. We are enslaved people, enslaved by British Moors. And we are looking for someone to help alleviate our oppression. Our people told them, do an economic boycott against your masters, and maybe they'll see eye to eye with you. Okay? And that's what kicked off them and their supposed fight for independence. Okay, now that we got a clear understanding and we set the foundation and the ground for us to be able to understand that the original Europeans and the original Britons, specifically, that founded the 13 colonies were Moors. Okay, now that we have that understanding, the Spirit led me to showing again that the original white man, WIGHT, these group of people were slaves, Slavs, the original slaves and Slavic race of people, okay, that we were enslaving all over the world, okay, and keeping them, and we're keeping them in our various strongholds and our empires across the world, okay, and they were introduced to the old world America as slaves, okay, by way of the British Moors coming over here to do business with us, the American Moors. So now I was led to show you all the flags. So I looked up our like original, like, all right, what was the British flag? So now that we know these are British, these Moors are British, all right, and that they're British Moors, let's see what their flags were that they were flying in this time to give us a deeper perspective. All right, so it says in 1603, the year of Queen Elizabeth's the first death, England and Scotland existed as completely separate nations. Okay, so if we just go back up here, just want to spot that. So Scotland is up here, England is considered down here. Okay. The United Kingdom, again, Britain is usually refers to the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom made up of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. That's why they got Ireland right here, and then Northern Ireland is orange, just like the United Kingdom. All right. Is an island nation in northwestern Europe. All right. So they saying that this was the throne of Elizabeth I, King James, all them. Okay, that whole line. They at one time existed, Scotland and England existed as completely separate nations, each with their own monarch and parliament. All right, so each with their own queen. All right, and parliament. Elizabeth, being a spinster and therefore childless, expressed a deathbed wish that her cousin, King James VI of Scotland, be named as her successor to the English throne. Thus, the Scottish monarch was projected into the unique position of ruling two nations simultaneously. He ruled Scotland as King James VI and England as King James I. So this is Queen Elizabeth I's cousin. This man is Queen Elizabeth I's cousin. Therefore, Queen Elizabeth has to be Moorish. So more research probably could reveal that. This is why it says King James Stuart I was a Moorish Scot from the Scottish Highlands. Scotland, it says Scotland and England were two separate nations. Okay? He was on the throne in Scotland. Queen Elizabeth I was on the throne in England. When she died, she said, give my throne to my cousin, King James. So he took over as the king of England, France, and Ireland. Okay, between 1603 and 1625. All right, and she died in 1603. He took control after her passing. Okay, the English national flag at this period consisted of a simple red cross, fully imposed upon a plain white field, this being the emblem of St. George, English patron saint. So it's probably safe to say that St. George was a Moor. The Scottish national flag consisted of a diagonal or X-shaped white cross, fully imposed upon a medium blue field. Here's the medium blue field. Here's the diagonal X, okay, or the cross. Okay, here's the cross here. Okay, a red cross. Okay, on a white field. This is England, this is Scotland. Queen Elizabeth under this flag and her monarchy and parliament, and King James, all right, under this one. And through her death, they were united. Okay, so these are Moorish flags here, because at this time, as I showed you all in this book, the European did not have a nation. All right. So when we say European, that we know of the European today as the so-called white man. All right. But this slave, this Slav, in this juncture of history, was a slave. They were not a part of a nation. Okay. They were a stateless people. Okay. They were a beggar people. All right. And a subjected and oppressed people in this time. Okay, this became known as the Union flag, and it was the forerunner of the present flag of Great Britain. Okay, so again, these flags right here merged to create this Union flag of 1606 to 1801. This man was ruling from 1603 to 1625. King George was in power, and the Prince of Wales. All right. 1727. All right. The King of Great Britain and Ireland, 1727 to 1760. So from 1603 to 1760, this line was in control. Okay, these Moors were in control. This Union flag came out of the union of King James and his cousin Queen Elizabeth's nations. Once they came together, they had a Union flag come out of it that survived from 1606 to 1801, showing you that these Moors were in power all the way up to this time. In the decree of issuance of the new flag, James stipulated that all ships of both English and Scottish registry were to fly this flag from atop their mainstays. So when they say the British had the strongest navy at the time, they're talking about British Moorish navigators controlling the sea. Okay, controlling the sea. All right. And these British Moors were in league with the American Moors. They came over here to establish colonies, to establish businesses, towns, therefore businesses. All right. To do business and tap into the rich resources here that the American Moors had. So they were in league with one another. Okay. But they were doing their bidding through their slaves. All right, allowing the American Moors, some of the American Moors, like the fact that the Europeans, the European Moors, the British Moors were using these white people as slaves and as property, and they started to adopt the custom of slavery. That's what started to create the rift between our people here in America, because some of us were siding with the slavery and engaging in the benefit of using these people this way. And then the more conservative element of our people, the people sticking to Islam, sticking to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, all right, operating under God's law and all of that, did not want to engage in that. So it started to create a rift between our people here on the land, all right, and between our cousins coming over from Britain. Okay, it started to create a rift. This rift is how the so-called subjugated white man in this time, okay, eventually rises up to the top out of that disarray, out of that chaos, out of that internal strife that we had going on. And they rose up out of this and eventually gained their independence from Britain, these British Moors. And then eventually, by the time of the Civil War, fought off the stronghold of the American Moors. All right. And then that's when they did the reconstructed history in about 1870. All right, and then in that phase, did the reconstructed history, started putting the American Moors, or what they reduced them to being called Indians, and start putting them in Indian boarding schools and educating them, and starting to teach to what they would call civilizing them, meaning make them adopt their customs. All right, and essentially started the process of erasing our memory. All right, and changing their history so that their future generations will feel more powerful than what they would, and how they would view us if they knew that we were ruling and we were subjugating them. Okay, so they flipped it up. Okay, the cross of St. George was to be flown from the foremast of the English ships, while the cross of St. Andrews was to be flown from the foremast of the Scottish ships. So the Scottish ships on their foremast would fly this flag. All right. On the English ships, they would fly this flag on their foremast. But this flag would fly on both ships atop their mainstays, all the way at the top. This flag would be shown. All right. In the front of the ship, one of these flags would be shown, identifying what nation they're from. But this shows that these nations are united. Now they're identifiable to other Moors that are in other nations, whether that's France, right? Whether that's Italy, whether that's countries in nations in Northern Africa, nations in America, that's all on the seas moving around. They would be able to recognize where these Moors were coming from. Okay. As the Susan Constant, Godspeed, and Discovery were of English registry and did not embark upon their historic voyage until December of 1606, it logically follows that on this voyage their flags conformed to the royal decree of the preceding spring. So around December of 1606, that's when they started carrying out, putting these flags where they were supposed to be. Okay. Then it says the Union flag created by James in 1606. This flag continued in use as a purely symbolic banner until 1707. All right, for 101 years. Then during the reign of Queen Anne, the parliaments of England and Scotland were united to form the new nation of Great Britain. You see these families that's ruling, but they got a larger body politics that they control, called England and Scotland. And they doing business, they interacting, they growing their wealth, their riches, their estates expanding. They unite their power and wealth together. All of these families unite. And then they form the power which we learn to be Great Britain. All right, so these are Moors doing this. All right. And Anne officially adopted the 101-year-old banner as the national flag of the newly created nation known as Great Britain. In 1801, when Ireland became a part of Great Britain, the Union flag was redesigned to include the cross of St. Patrick. All right. So now we got the cross of St. George, the cross of St. Andrew, and the cross of St. Patrick. All right. Red cross, St. Patrick, white cross, St. Andrews, red cross. All right. St. George, St. George, white cross, St. Andrews, and red cross. St. Patrick. Okay, so this is what this form means. This flag that they're flying today means. But as you can see, the original people that formed this are not the people controlling over there in Britain, the UK, and stuff now. It is their slaves. It is their slaves. They kicked all up, just as sure as we read up here. It says in 449 AD, certain Englishmen came from North Germany, south of the Baltic Sea, and pushed the Black British Boss westward into Wales, Westmoreland, Devon, Scotland, Cumberland, and Cornwall, white people came from this area and pushed Moors this way into this area. These Moors restructure, and in a future time, the 1600s and all of that, they are consolidating kingdoms over here now. And now they out here working with other Moors in Africa, in the middle, what they call the Middle East today, and in America, enslaving all these white people that's been terrorizing these nations over here. And they forming unions. Okay, so this is a flag that has its origin in British Moors, all right, melanated people in Europe, that the so-called European of today, the white man of today, his ancestors eventually usurped these kingdoms and took these kingdoms over and carrying these ancient Moors. This is how they gave themselves a nation. They didn't have a nation. So they went in, kicked the original people out of these nations, and then assumed control over these nations. Okay? But they were their property first, their slaves first. They were being taught by these people. So they understood, a group of them, of course, will understand these nations and how the governments work to a certain extent and all of that. All right. Then they got in, infiltrated them, took them over, and started acting like these people. All right. That's why you would see this is the original Moors that were ruling Europe. And then you would get all right, I'm looking for a specific picture. Let's see. I did it like this last time. All right, the Europeans coming up and they wearing these wigs now. All right, you ain't never seen no European walking around with no hair like this. All right, so they are mimicking these people, these original people. Okay, they're mimicking these individuals. Okay, wearing wigs and stuff. All right, so I want to bring that home. With now you got the United States flag, right? This is the corporate flag, the Star Spangled Banner, not a flag, but a banner. All right, a banner. This is known as the Star Spangled Banner. It's not a flag, even though they'll tell us that it's a flag. All right, what is its colors? Red, white, and blue. Red, white, and blue. You see? So even though these are originally Moorish nations, all right, coming out of Europe, that got taken over, these colonists, these slaves that eventually in America gained their independence, when they were still formulating their government, they still pulling from the government principles and the nations that we had created and creating their own spawns. So again, they say that the 13 stripes stand for the original 13 states, right? The states came out of the 13 colonies, but the 13 colonies of 13 states now came out of the investment that these people made. That's how you know that the 13 states and the 50 states and the other states that spawned off of to create the 50 states are all corporate properties, are all assets and investments of Europe, of Britain, of Great Britain. That's why Great Britain, they always worried about the Queen and all that stuff, because these are the people who, since they took over the Moors who were controlling Britain, these slaves took over the British Empire. They now grabbed hold of the assets and the property in the United States under this corporate flag. You see, so all this stuff going on, this stuff controlled by the British Empire, by the Europeans, by the crown. Okay. So we got to understand that. All right. And then I show you the Confederate flag. Same thing. Blue field, red and white. Okay. Now these again would be the white people that were separating from the other white people that wanted to still operate with the British Moors. All right, the North. All right, the South. They were siding with the Southern landowners, the Moorish Americans that were ruling the South. The so-called Creek, the Muskogee Indians, the Seminoles. They starting to side with these groups of people. All right, to defend the land and to operate more under the Moorish Republic. All right. Whereas the North, they started to reveal that they were still basically trying to act under British rule and British law and stuff like that. You get what I'm saying? And so we get the Confederate battle flag. What is this? But the cross of St. Andrews and the cross of St. Patrick. Right? Cross of St. Andrews, right there. White, right there. And then cross from Ireland, the British Moors out of Ireland. All right, the Moors out of Ireland, and the flag of St. Patrick. All right, let me see. Yeah, St. Patrick. I think I'm right. Yeah. All right. So we got to be able to see these things still being contained in here. All right. They still being contained in here. All right. Same thing. All right. So these flags are not what people purport them to be. And we'll go further in this stuff and reveal what was really going on. But it's clear. It's right here. All right. And white people don't even realize these flags spawned off of British Moors whose thrones y'all had usurped and took over. So it's not yours. You don't control, you don't own the throne. You're not a natural heir to the thrones that y'all own or none of that. Y'all can be disposed at any time when these people wake up. Same thing for them on American land. They can be disposed of at any moment. The original people wake up and grab back hold their estates and all that they have. Okay. So probably when we pick up in the next session, we'll probably go into the Revolutionary War, which spawned directly after they did the Articles of Association. Y'all see the Articles of Association was 1774. And the Revolutionary War is claimed to have started in 1775. So we're going to go into this because this is how the European, the so-called white man, begins his fight for independence to come from under the stronghold of the Moorish Empire, the Moroccan Empire, the Moors that's ruling the whole planet, how they start to come out of it through to the breaking down of our infrastructure and infighting and things like that. Okay.